of Wisconsin, the Honorable Scott Walker.
Thank you. Freedom, endowed by our Creator, defined by our Constitution, but defended each and every day by the men and women who proudly wear the uniform of these United States. Before we go any further, would anyone who serves in the military today, anyone who served as a veteran in the past, and for that matter, would anyone who is a family member of a service member or veteran, would you please stand at this moment? Appreciate that. That includes all of you, and it includes the Senate President who just stood up here as a military veteran himself. And so for me to acknowledge that, to talk about freedom, which I'm going to talk about here quite a bit for the next few minutes, it's important to remember where those freedoms come from. You know, they're endowed from up above, but defined by the Constitution. But we wouldn't have them without the men and women that you just saw stand up, and the families that represent them not only here but across this great country. It's also an honor to be introduced not only by the leader of the state Senate here in Colorado, but someone from Colorado Springs, because on November 2nd, 1967, I was born in what's now called Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs. My parents had come out from northern Illinois, where they were raised. My dad was an associate pastor for Christian education at First Baptist Church in downtown Colorado Springs, where the church is still there today. In fact, a few years ago, after I was first elected governor, the first time, in 2010, we went to a new governor's conference. It was at the Broadmoor, but on Sunday, instead of going to the sessions that morning, we went over to First Baptist, and my wife got a taste of hearing all after service from one late 70 to 80-year-old woman after another who said, "I used to hold your husband in my arms in the nursery." So it was kind of fun. And so we love to keep coming back to Colorado, my birth state. I know there's folks not only from Colorado, but all across the West and all across the country here. Thank you for coming out. And it really is an honor. I also want to say thanks, because I know for many of you here, you know, Senator Cadman talked about this, but a few years ago, we had a few visitors in Wisconsin. In fact, so many of you here in that recall election helped us out. You helped us out. Many of you sent 20 or 30 bucks. Many of you made phone calls from afar. Some of you even traveled all the way to Wisconsin. We appreciate that. But most of all, on behalf of Tonette and I and our family, our boys, Matt and Alex, so many of you told us you prayed for us. And I just got to tell you what a difference that made to us. Thank you so much for doing that. My request going forward would be don't stop, because we need the prayers now more than ever. And we appreciate it because, as Senator Cadman mentioned, we had at one point over 100,000 protesters in our capital. In fact, if you may not remember this, but the Occupy movement did not start in Wall Street. It started in Madison, Wisconsin, in my state capital. And it wasn't until months later when we finally won those battles that they actually went onto Wall Street and around the rest of the country. So my apologies for starting that. But we did what we thought was important. You see, when back in 2009, about a year and a half before the election, Tonette and I sat down and talked about, thought about, ultimately prayed about the state of our state, and we saw that a state that had an unemployment rate peaked out at 9.2%, a state where under the previous governor we lost 133,000 jobs, where taxes had gone up by over $1 billion by the governor and Democrats were in charge before. We saw a state that was in trouble, and on behalf of our two sons, we said we got to do something. And I'm proud to tell you, some 4+ years later, our state has turned around. But we couldn't have done it without the support of people helping us out, because you see, when they came in with all those protesters, they were trying to intimidate us. That's what they do at the state, at the federal, at the local level. They try to intimidate the big government special interests. Well, I'm proud to tell you tonight that we were not intimidated. It charged us with refocusing on why we were elected in the first place and the people we were elected to serve. And instead of backing down, we stood up and took the power out of the hands of the big government special interests and put it firmly in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers. You see, our reforms not only changed unions in our state, but we were able to change our economic status. We went from 9.2% unemployment at the beginning of 2010, 8.1% the month before I took office. We're down to about 4.5% last month. We took it. We have a labor participation rate that's well above the national level. We had a $3.6 billion budget deficit. Turned it into a surplus in each of the last years, balanced our budget moving forward. We have a rainy day fund that's 165 times bigger than we took office. The pension system is the only one fully funded in the country. We've done all the things you would expect economically and fiscally, but what I'm most proud of is how we changed state and local government. For example, in our schools, we now can hire and fire based on merit because we got rid of seniority and tenure. Remember back in 2011 how those protesters said public schools were going to fall apart if we did something like that? Well, I'm here to tell you 4 years later, graduation rates are up. Third grade reading scores are up. ACT scores are now second best in the country in states where the kids take the exam, have to take the exam. But it's not just in those areas. You see, we did other things as well. Sometimes people don't know about this because they hear about the unions. But we did other things. We reined in regulations. We got rid of frivolous lawsuits. We did more. We defunded Planned Parenthood and passed pro-life legislation. We passed castle doctrine and concealed carry so that people can protect themselves, their family, and their loved ones if they're law-abiding citizens. Who would have thought this, but we made Wisconsin the 25th state in the country to have the right to work, the freedom to work without being forced to be in a labor union. And in our state, it's now easy to vote, but hard to cheat. If you want to vote in the state of Wisconsin, you got to have a photo ID to vote in the next election. And so I tell all of you that, not to brag, well, maybe not too much, but rather tell you in a state like Wisconsin, a state that hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984 when Ronald Reagan last stood for re-election, if a state like that can take ideas that are big and bold and have them enacted and then elect a governor not just the first time, but a second time and a third time in 4 years, and not only elect a governor, but add additional seats in the majority, going from Democrat to Republican, to adding more Republicans, to adding even more Republicans last fall. If we can do it in Wisconsin, we can certainly do it in Washington and all across America. And let me give you 3 quick reasons why that's important for our country. It's all about growth, reform, and safety. You see, right now, I think we've got a lot of politicians in Washington who think we grow the economy by growing Washington. Well, I got a message for them. We grow the economy in cities and towns and villages all across this nation, that people create jobs, not the government. It's about time to get the government out of the way. That means reining in frivolous and out-of-control lawsuits, particularly all those new ones that the Obama administration had put in place. It means once and for all repealing Obamacare outright, fully, immediately, and putting patients and families back in charge. It means using the abundance of what God has given us here in this country and on this continent when it comes to fuel and energy supplies, with all of the above, not picking winners and losers, but using all that we have here in the West and all across the country, starting with improving the Keystone Pipeline on day one. It means not only through kindergarten through 12th grade, but beyond, helping people get the education and the skills and the qualifications they need to succeed in a way that says we're going to let the other side worry about how low wages are. We're going to get people the skills they need to succeed with careers that pay 2 or 3 or 4 times the minimum wage, because we want everyone to be lifted up in this economic recovery. And finally, it means lowering the burden when it comes to taxes. Lowering the burden on hardworking taxpayers, whether it be individuals or on job creators, so that we're competitive again in the world today, so that more American jobs can come back home to put more of our fellow citizens back to work. Now, in addition to growth, we need to talk more about reform. Again, there's a huge contrast. Think about people like the President, Hillary Clinton. They tend to measure success in government by how many people are dependent on the government, right? I don't know about you, but I think for most of us in this country, we believe that success should be measured by just the opposite, by how many people are no longer dependent on the government. That's right. You see, we understand that true freedom and prosperity do not come from the mighty hand of the government. They come from empowering people to live their own lives and control their own destinies to the dignity that is born of work. When I was a small kid growing up, we had moved to Delavan from Colorado Springs to Plainfield, Iowa, eventually to Delavan, Wisconsin when I was in 3rd grade. And my first job was washing dishes at the Countryside Restaurant. Later in life, I moved up in the big time. In high school, I started flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. True story, I was in Delavan. Paul Ryan, my good friend, was about 20 miles down the road from me in Janesville. He was flipping burgers there. I was flipping burgers at my home. The only difference is his manager told him he had to flip hamburgers in the back because he didn't have the interpersonal skills to work the front cash register. It's true. But regardless of that, I think about my time as a kid, growing up there working, learning that work ethic from those first jobs. And I think about my parents, my dad, a small-town preacher, my mom, a part-time secretary and a bookkeeper at one of the businesses in town. And I think about them and my grandparents, my mom's parents, my grandpa and grandma were farmers that didn't have indoor plumbing until my mother went off to junior high school. My dad's dad, my grandpa Walker, was a machinist for 42 years at Barbara Coleman. I look back in life, and for my brother and I, we realized we didn't inherit fame or fortune from our family. What we got was the belief that if you work hard and you play by the rules, you can do and be anything you want in America. That's the American dream, and we need to be champions for everyone to live the American dream. And finally, in addition to talking about growth and about reform, the last thing I want to spend a moment or two talking about is safety. Safety. You see, some people might think, what is he talking about? Safety. Is that public safety? Is it boater safety? Is it hunter safety? No. Safety, to me, is what many people in Washington call national security. But see, I call it safety because when I see a video of a Jordanian pilot burned alive in a cage, when I see Christians from Egypt and elsewhere around the world beheaded because of their faith, that's something I feel in my heart and in my soul. And that makes me worry for the safety of them and for others like them and for people all around this world, including me and my family. And I got to tell you, I think there's an increasing interest around this country and around this world for America to start leading again. It troubles me. I remember as a kid, back in 79 and 80, my brother David and I used to put yellow ribbons around the tree in front of our house, our oak tree in the front, because for 444 days, 52 Americans were held hostage in Iran. One of them is a friend of mine named Kevin Hermaning, who was the youngest Marine held hostage at that time. He grew up in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. He lives in Wausau right now. And I realized, watching what happened to Kevin back then, Iran has not changed. Iran is not a place we should do business with. And then I look at this president, earlier this year, he literally looked in the eyes of the American people and said, the greatest threat for future generations is climate change. climate change. Well, I got a message for you, Mr. President. The greatest threat for the American people, the greatest threat for the people of the world is not climate change. It is radical Islamic terrorism, and we need leaders who are willing to stand up and do something about it. We need a president who understands that Israel is actually an ally and will start treating her as such. And we need a president who has the courage to look the American people in the eye and tell them something that might not be easy to hear. You see, it's not going to take a week or a month or maybe even a year. But our enemy today is not like the enemy of the past. It's not like for those of us who grew up in the Cold War where containment was enough. No, our enemy today is like a virus. It's like a virus. If you don't take it out, it will only come back stronger. And as I look at the world today, on behalf of your children and mine, I'd rather take the fight to them instead of waiting till they bring the fight to us. And so there's a lot at stake in this next election. And there's a lot of great Republicans either thinking about or already in this race. But I would just ask you one quick thing, and then I want to end with a quick story to bring this all home. I would ask, as you consider who you might support for president, that you think about the fact that there are really a great emerging group of Republican candidates, but they really kind of fall into two camps. There are fighters who have yet to win those battles. And there are winners who have yet to fight those battles. If we were to throw our hat in the ring, I would contend to you that we could do both. Fight those battles and win those battles on the issues that matter to everyday Americans to further our common sense conservative reforms. And so as we end, before I spend a few minutes sitting down with Hugh Hewitt and answering some questions for you here this evening, I just want to tell you, I'm an optimist. I love America. I love the people of this country. I'm upset with the federal government, but I love America and the people of this great country, and I'm optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic not just because of what I've seen in my state, but in many other states across this country. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen common sense, conservative, Republican reformers take office in our states and transform those states. Transform those states moving forward. But more so than just what we've seen in the last few years, I'm an optimist because I love the history of America. And I know the history of America will lead us to better days to come. You see, as a kid, I grew up loving history so much, I thought of our founders as almost bigger than life. Superheroes in my mind. And so over the years, though, we never had a chance to go to Philadelphia. And a couple years back, Tonette and I, my wife and I, who's here with me tonight, we got a chance to go to Philadelphia for the first time. And as you can imagine, as someone who loved history and loved thinking about those remarkable founders, we got up early in the morning. We went over past the Liberty Bell, and with the Park Service, we went into Independence Hall. For any of you who have ever been there, you know it's pretty small. It's about a fraction of the stage we're on up here. And so as I got up there early in the morning, as the sun was coming up, and I looked into the room and kind of took it all in, I looked at the desk, and I looked at the chairs, and I was ready to be blown away. But instead, it dawned on me. These were ordinary people. These were ordinary people who'd done something quite extraordinary. You see, these were people who didn't just risk their political careers. These were people who didn't just risk their business ventures. These were patriots. Patriots who risked their lives for the freedom we hold dear today. Ladies and gentlemen, here tonight, I would tell you that moments like that remind me that what makes America great, what makes us exceptional, what makes us the greatest country in the history of the world has been all throughout our nation's history. In times of crisis, be it economic or fiscal, be it military or spiritual, what makes America amazing has been all throughout those times. There have been men and women of courage who've been willing to think more about the future of their children and their grandchildren than they thought about their own futures. Ladies and gentlemen, here tonight, I would tell you that this is one of those times. This is one of those moments in history. This is the opportunity for us to look back and tell future generations, we were there. We stood up. We did what was required to make America great again. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're going to do. Thank you for helping to make America great again.